These romance scammers just don't care anything about the lives they ruin. Let's get right to it, starting with number 5, Match.com/scam. Grace Akintaro lured 7 men into fake relationships on Match.com only to steal and defraud them out of thousands of pounds. Akintaro posed as Amanda Jenson and used her profile on the popular online dating site to match with her targets. She developed strong relationships with her victims and spoke to at least 2 of them on the phone. After Akintaro established connections with the men, she persuaded them to send her money for things like travel and other related expenses. Akintaro said she first started the scam out of naivete and during a time when she was being used by the person she loved. She asked for the cash because she was in debt and needed help paying it off. But then it became too easy to just ask for more. Her victims often pushed to meet her in person, but she always had an excuse for canceling dates. But Akintaro's refusal to meet with her partners didn't stop her from asking them for more money, and it didn't stop them from giving. She created documents to provide evidence that Amanda Jenson would soon receive an inheritance from a relative. And once the funds came through, she promised she'd totally pay back all the money. Akintaro's victims took extreme measures to help her. One sent her almost £60,000, while another dipped into his late wife's insurance policy. Another of Akintaro's victims took out a reverse mortgage on his home. She told another victim that she'd fly to a London airport and told the guy to meet her there. So he was waiting in the arrivals lounge when Amanda called to tell him she could see him waiting but was held up by customs. Apparently, customs needed money to release her. Thugs. The guy smelled the BS, refused to pay, and left. Akintaro used PayPal to receive the money, then moved it between 3 different bank accounts, taking chunks of it at different branches and spending it as quickly as possible. She'd stolen almost £130,000 from 7 victims and pleaded guilty to 7 counts of fraud. By the time she was arrested, the only asset she had remaining from her scam was a £6,500 car. Number 4, Shrek The Con Artist. Peter Berry posed as a rich businessman to defraud lonely women out of thousands of dollars. Berry met his victims through online dating sites, where he got into fake relationships before persuading them to invest money in phony business opportunities. Berry had received a 5-year jail sentence for fraud, but was released on good behavior after 2 years. Upon his release, Berry immediately returned to his criminal activities. He attempted to disguise his identity by growing a thick beard and speaking with an Eastern European accent, which might only fool those who were familiar with him, but whatever. Due to his 6'2", 280-pound frame and warm eyes, he reminded one of his victims of Shrek. Berry might have seemed innocent initially, but he swindled $2.5 million from over 100 women. When the police tracked him down for a second time, he lived with his wife, who knew Berry as Jonathan Jones. Berry returned to jail to complete the last 3 years of his jail sentence. When the time came for his trial at Inner London Crown Court, he requested to move it 60 miles south to Lewes Crown Court due to poor air quality. He claimed that London's poor air quality would aggravate his acute asthma and make him sleep, but he was more likely trying to delay his day in court. Berry's victims came from many backgrounds and included a doctor, a lawyer, and a hedge fund manager. He used a series of fake identities, such as Dr. James Smith, Jay Smith, Jonathan Jasper John, and Taz Keaty. Berry's aliases had plausible and well-thought-out background stories, making it easy to fall for his act. Berry made up elaborate stories to convince his victims to give him money, telling one woman that he needed $14,000 for a search and rescue mission for a friend who went missing climbing in the Himalayas. Joanne Clifford lost almost $400,000 to Berry's lies when she was matched with him on Plenty of Fish. Berry went by the username Waterboy, which seems like such a weird choice since it conjures up images of the buffoon from the Adam Sandler movie when he contacted Clifford. They spent the next few days messaging on the site before moving over to texting and talking on the phone. When they met in person, he introduced himself as James Smith, a man with a doctorate in engineering working on a prototype for wind turbines. Berry explained that he had recently sold his BMW to fund the project and had to keep the details secret. A few weeks after the meeting, he called Clifford in a panic. She could hear the distress in his voice while he told her there was a big mistake at work that was being pinned on him. He needed to raise another $250,000 quickly and was $65,000 short. So Clifford offered to loan him the rest of the money, but he initially refused. Eventually, he let her send $25,000. Shortly after the incident, they went out of town for a night, which he made Clifford pay for. Then they headed to London and went on a shopping spree on her dime. Berry was supposedly broke, but that didn't stop him from shopping at the Apple store and buying buying a new pair of sunglasses. A few weeks passed before Barry was on the phone again, panicking about his financial struggles. Clifford sent over another $6,500 to help him get by. Barry told her that his finances were dire and he was worried he would have to lay off an employee. So Clifford wanted to help and gave him another $13,000, totally unaware of Kate Peel. Kate Peel met Barry at a kayaking club. He introduced himself as Jason Smith, and after a few kayaking trips, they started dating. Peel had inherited a significant amount of money from her partner after he passed away. Barry claimed to be a business consultant and told her about an exciting investment opportunity he knew about in IT. If she was going to go through with it, he would need an investment over the next few days. He told Peel that he could guarantee an incredible 20% return on her investment. So she transferred almost $20,000 to an account that Barry controlled. Barry claimed he also wanted to invest, but was short by $3,800. And believing that their investments would grow significantly, Peel agreed to lend Barry the extra funds. Peel eventually looked Barry up online and learned that he was a convicted con artist. So of course she freaked out, confronted him, and demanded an explanation, but he reassured her that he told her the truth and that her money was safe. So Peel gave him the benefit of the doubt, but when she lost contact with him after a few months, she went to the police because she was afraid he was missing. The police told her that they were actually in the middle of investigating him for fraud. Barry's neighbor, Christine Gearing, also fell victim to Barry's lies. They met when he moved into his apartment and introduced himself as John Jones. Gearing had divided her time between the UK and the Middle East and was considering moving back to the UK full-time and wanted to get a new job. In the meantime, Barry helped her find work doing odd jobs to help stay afloat. Barry also told her he was part of a peer consortium group where people would bring a business deal and the group would provide high-interest, short-term loans to help get started. Gearing then told Barry she had inherited money when she sold her mother's house after she passed away and was looking for an opportunity. So Barry invited Gearing to join the peer consortium group as a way to earn money on her investment. He told her about a short-term investment that she could participate in and showed her some papers but refused to leave them with her, promising to photocopy them instead. So Gearing bought in and decided to transfer $13,000 to Barry. A few months later, he came back to her with another investment opportunity. But Gearing didn't like the way he burst into her apartment and pressured her into making big investments. She eventually invested $6,400, but mainly because she wanted him to leave her apartment, which is one of the worst reasons to hand someone that amount of cash. Barry then told her he was having financial troubles and used money belonging to the peer funding group to buy a house. Barry made tons of extravagant purchases with the stolen money. He was an avid yachtsman who broke multiple world records. Detectives raided his house. They found designer clothing, sports equipment, underwater cameras, GPSs, and a Volkswagen with a personalized license plate that said K666 Yak. Barry had previously appeared in court and pleaded guilty to 19 counts of theft and fraud. During that time, he took out lines of credit and signed up for phone contracts under other people's names, convinced victims to invest in business opportunities, and asked a friend for money after claiming he lost his wallet on vacation. He had also stolen Sarah Terry's credit card details when she let him buy a kayak online using her card. He changed her PIN number and ran up a bill of $12,000. Around that same time, he took out a $20,000 loan in Terry's name to buy a Volkswagen van. Peter Barry's 4-day trial found him guilty of 7 counts of fraud and received an 8-year jail sentence. It's funny that one of Barry's victims said he reminded her of Shrek, since in the end, he looked more like a big donkey. Number 3. Fattening Up. Rebecca Holloway lost over $100,000 as part of a pig butchering scam after she met a scammer on Tinder. The divorced mother of 3 was in a messy separation from her second husband when she joined the dating app. She was matched with a guy named Fred, who she thought was a French entrepreneur. Fred convinced her to unknowingly invest in this type of big scam where she lost most of her life savings. Pig butchering scams have exploded across the U.S. Scammers will really play the long con by quote-unquote fattening up victims with intense fake romantic relationships before they try giving any investment advice. Holloway had worked as a freelance marketing executive when she met Fred. She felt an instant connection to a man that was unlike anyone else she had ever dated. Like all these guys, he constantly sent her romantic and attentive messages, slowly reeling her in. Fred said he was a French businessman living in Philadelphia and had studied economics in college. He lived with his daughter and quickly bonded with Holloway over being a single parent. But the tone of their text changed when Fred started talking about his crypto investments, which caught Holloway's interest. He seemed to understand the market well because of his economics degree and had an in-depth discussion with her about the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank. Fred explained that because of the bank's collapse, many people have decided to invest in alternative platforms like Bitcoin. So Holloway researched his claims to see that many news outlets talked about Bitcoin spikes following the collapse. And of course, reports were everywhere. After she was convinced, Fred directed her to the best crypto platform, and believing it was legit, she invested $1,000. The platform appeared like any other crypto platform. The only difference was its slightly unusual URL. But since Holloway wasn't all that tech savvy, it didn't raise any alarms. These schemes take a lot of time, and the first step is luring the victim with the promise of high investment returns. Holloway watched her investment grow and made $168 on 4 trades, which was a great start. As is typical in these scams, Holloway was able to withdraw her early earnings and transfer them into her bank account. Confident she found a lucrative investment opportunity, she transferred another $6,000 from her savings into her crypto account. She quickly made money on that investment too. And while this was happening, her relationship with Fred grew more serious. Although Fred always somehow had a valid reason not to meet in person, he would often video chat, but he was always cooking or doing something else while they spoke. So Rebecca never really got a good look at his face. But since he was on camera, it must have been enough for her to stay invested. Holloway eventually decided to cash out her entire 401k worth $100,000, and after taxes, she had $70,000 to invest. Everything seemed to be going great until she told a friend about her new relationship over dinner. The friend freaked out and told her about pig butchering scams, and that's when Holloway realized she might be caught in one. After that dinner, Holloway began questioning everything about her relationship. Fred didn't always have a French accent when they spoke. Sometimes his voice sounded so different on the phone that it was like she was talking to a different person, which she probably was. Holloway reported her case to the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, a private corporation that tries to regulate brokerage firms and exchange markets, but there was basically no chance she'd get her money back. People like Holloway aren't the only victims of these types of scams. Often the scammers are honest workers lured by the promise of legitimate jobs. They communicate with people like Holloway and receive scripts tailored to each victim. Many others have also fallen victim to this scam, like tech executive Shreya Datta, who lost $450,000. Fellow single mother, Kate, lost $80,000 in a similar scheme. Combined, Holloway, Datta, and Kate handed scammers over $500,000. Number 2. Hypnotized. Cheryl Mitchell posed as a government official and a gas and electricity worker to scam senior citizens out of their pensions. Mitchell spoke to people on their doorsteps and, with a short conversation, gained their trust enough to have them give her their bank details. She actually persuaded a 69-year-old man that he wouldn't receive his state pension if there was too much money in his account. So Mitchell took him to a bank and convinced him to withdraw $17,000, which he believed Mitchell would put in a secure account in his name. Instead, she kept the money for herself. Another victim was Iris Gordon. Mitchell knocked on Gordon's door and explained that if she changed her electricity account, Gordon would save some money on her future bills. So Gordon gave Mitchell her debit card to change her service. Mitchell then took the card and left, but brought it back a few days later. The mother of 2 had previously run a tax scam where the British government gave her over $72,000 in tax credits after she said she was the single mother of 8 children. Mitchell also targeted 86-year-old Alexander Hepburn when she entered into a relationship with him. During that time, she funneled $36,000 from his account to hers and claimed she needed it to care for her sister. Not only did she steal the man's money, but Mitchell also applied for a loan online in Hepburn's name. She also used his details to try and buy a $45,000 Audi and used Hepburn's credit card to put down a $1,300 deposit on a BMW. While she was in custody, Hepburn actually visited her 6 times and still sent her multiple love letters. She's currently awaiting sentencing. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to stay right on this video to find out how she was able to get revenge on her romance scammer. Number 1. Deceived by TV star's fake love. Lydia Abdul-Malik posed as an Australian actor to con a flight attendant into believing the TV star was in love with her. The flight attendant, who's identified only as Jess, met Lincoln Lewis at work when she served him on a flight and took a picture with him. Lewis starred in Home and Away, a popular Australian soap opera. After meeting Lewis, Jess friended him on Facebook. The pair began an online friendship and messaged regularly. But Jess wasn't speaking to the real Lincoln Lewis. She was actually communicating with Lydia Abdulmalik. The pair spoke frequently, and eventually, the fake Lewis suggested they talk on the phone. During the call, Jess said Lewis was engaged and gave her a lot of compliments. Despite never meeting in person after the first time, the pair began a long-distance relationship and constantly spoke via phone and text. But Lewis always had excuses for why they couldn't meet in person, so Jess began to doubt the authenticity of the relationship. However, Jess silenced her doubts when Lewis acted shocked and didn't understand why someone would even initiate contact just to deceive her. Still, Jess wanted proof she was talking to the real Lewis, so they arranged a Skype call. As far as Jess could tell, she was speaking to the actor, but she noticed there was a slight delay on his end. The camera would freeze for a few seconds, and then she would see him laughing and throwing his head back. Abdul Malik had used software that takes video footage of a person and turns it into a real-life scenario. One of Jess's co-workers told her that the real Lincoln Lewis was on a flight to Brisbane. She's a stewardess, remember? Despite him telling her he was in Sydney. Jess had been talking to Lewis the entire time that he was supposed to be in the air. Eventually, Jess contacted the real Lewis to find out the truth. To his credit, the real Lincoln Lewis actually spoke with her and explained that she'd been talking to a scammer the entire time. After the disappointing conversation, Jess attempted to end the relationship with the catfish, who ended up harassing her so much she had to change her cell phone number. 10 minutes after changing her number, Abdul Malik reached out to the phone carrier to get Jess's new number and somehow got it. Abdul Malik then started stalking Jess, forcing her to move twice and change her daughter's school. However, Abdul Malik kept finding them and wouldn't stop calling. Unaware that Abdul Malik was even female, she contacted the police for help. She secretly recorded her calls with the catfish and eventually persuaded Abdul Malik to put money into Jess's bank account to buy a new phone. Police found Abdul Malik at the bank where they made the arrest. Having believed that Abdul Malik was a man for so long, Jess was shocked. Another victim and friend of Jess's, Emma, ended her life after she'd been catfished by Abdul Malik as well. Abdul Malik was found guilty of 6 counts of stalking and sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. She attempted to appeal the ruling, but the judge upheld the guilty verdict and increased Abdul Malik's sentence to 4 years. And how about what a stand-up guy Lincoln Lewis is? You know, actors and actresses get this sort of thing all the time with fans getting catfished, but the man still had enough compassion to talk to Jess and let her down gently. What a good dude. You never do anything spontaneous. Those were the words spoken to the then 36-year-old Acacia Windnot by her friend before she went on a date with Wilson Jackson, the man who would consume the next few years of her life for all the wrong reasons. Windnot's life truly changed when she received a friend request and a follow-up Facebook message from Jackson. On the surface, Jackson seemed like a genuine guy. He wore nice clothes in his pictures, and they even shared 4 mutual friends. His expression on the photos oozed charm, intelligence, and confidence. Jackson's message was, "What's up, beautiful?" Confirm these impressions. "What's up, beautiful" wasn't an uncommon first message for Windnot to find in her DMs. It's a message that she's used to getting. Nevertheless, Jackson stuck out like a well-dressed, confident thumb. To his "What's up, beautiful," Windnot responded with a suspicious "hello." But it was enough to get a response from Jackson. He continued the Facebook message convo with Windnot for several weeks before asking her on a date. During those weeks, Windnot became close to Jackson. She found out he wasn't a catfish after they FaceTimed on a few occasions. They spoke on the phone, talking about their mutual love of sports, particularly football. Jackson asked her about the 9 years she served in the Air Force, and Windnot answered, telling him all about her time abroad. Jackson listened to every word. In fact, Windnot got the impression that he cared about her, especially when he offered to fly Windnot from her home in Scottsdale, Arizona, out to his house in LA for Christmas. Windnot's original plans were to spend Christmas with her best friend, but the plans were canceled at the last minute. Now, left with no holiday plans, Windnot was still on the fence about accepting Jackson's offer. This was not something she'd normally do. Windnot's friend eventually convinced her to let Jackson buy her a ticket to LA and finally do something spontaneous. Windnot packed her things and left for the airport. Earlier, Jackson sent Windnot a screenshot of the boarding pass he'd bought for her. Everything seemed to be in order. Not to mention, Windnot had finally found someone she liked who could meet her expectations. However, When she got to the airport, employees said her ticket was invalid. Wiedenot, assuming something must have gone wrong during the purchasing process, called Jackson to get things sorted out. But when Jackson answered the phone, he didn't offer a solution. Instead, he insisted the ticket must be valid. Wiedenot explained that the flight would leave soon and she needed a ticket to LA pronto. So Jackson instructed Wiedenot to buy a ticket at the airport. He promised to pay her back when she got to LA, and to prove something was going on with the ticket he initially bought, Jackson sent Wiedenot screenshots of him dealing with the bank. Wiedenot says she proceeded to buy a ticket to LA and boarded the plane. Her plane landed at LAX in the late hours of the night. Jackson picked her up and took her to the movies. Wiedenot recalls how he was in person just as charming, fun, and kind as he seemed on FaceTime. Jackson asked her about Wiedenot's future, her career aspirations, and any wild, crazy dreams she harbored. In the morning, like a true gentleman, he cooked her breakfast, a classic combination of bacon and eggs. After they ate breakfast, Jackson took Wiedenot back to the airport. On Monday, her second full day back home, Wiedenot noticed over $3,000 was missing from her bank account. Wiedenot scanned her card's transaction history and discovered where the purchases were made. The largest transaction was a $2,500 transfer to another account. The other two payments for a plane ticket and items at a fast food restaurant. All the money charges were billed from California. Wiedenot knew exactly who had used her card. So, not long after seeing the charges, Wiedenot filed a police report against Jackson. She wanted Jackson apprehended as soon as possible. Unfortunately, the police didn't share her desire for revenge. When Wiedenot called the Scottsdale police, they deferred her to the Los Angeles police, who boomeranged Wiedenot right back to Scottsdale police, telling her she'd have to file her report with them. Most people would give up, as $3,000 might not be a big deal. But Wiedenot didn't care about the money. Instead of moving on, Wiedenot started her own investigation into Jackson. Jackson had already blocked her number, so asking her suspect questions over the phone was not an option. With no prior background in research, Wiedenot began investigating Jackson. She started with the basics. Where did Jackson live? Even though she'd been to his house, Wiedenot couldn't remember Jackson's address, and without his address, finding Jackson would be very difficult. She couldn't find any home addresses linked to the purchases on her bank statement, but she did find the address of the fast food restaurant. After finding the restaurant address, Wiedenot searched every apartment complex in the area, and with the help of her memory, found the apartment complex she stayed at with Jackson. She remembered Jackson taking her to a tall building, so tall that they had to park in an underground parking garage. So, Wiedenot narrowed her search to tall apartment buildings with underground garages. She also remembered being close to a movie theater on a noisy LA street. Using these very specific criteria, Wiedenot found a potential match. Just to be sure it was the building she stayed at, the rookie sleuth looked up the floor plans, then based on her memory of walking through the rooms and hallways, determined this was the place. Wiedenot called the building's phone number and asked the clerk if a resident named Will Jackson lived there. The clerk said no, and Wiedenot felt a dreadful epiphany wash over her. Will Jackson was not his real name. Wiedenot kept digging. She used methods she initially learned from MTV's Catfish, such as reverse Google image searches on Jackson's Facebook page. Eventually, one of those reverse searches yielded a link to a social media account under a different name. The account had an email written in the bio. Wiedenot dug deeper into the email account and discovered it belonged to someone named Sincere Jackson. Wiedenot kept digging and Googled the name. The results were mostly unrelated, except for one article. The article was small, only 85 words, but it contained some vital info on Jackson. Oddly enough, the article's publisher was from Orlando, a local paper called the West Orlando News. In 2011, the Orlando News published an article on Jackson, saying that the police department were searching for victims willing to come forward and testify against Jackson. Alongside the victim's story was a mugshot of Jackson, who Wiedenot easily recognized. The real question was, who are these victims? And what did Jackson do to them? Was it similar to what he did to her? Detective Wiedenot would soon find out. In 2007, a Florida woman who gave reporters the alias Shonda Porter dated Jackson. She described him as a snake who could shed his skin on command and become anyone he needed to be. But that isn't how Jackson saw himself. Porter dated Jackson long enough to notice a large tattoo on his back, written in bold, daring letters, "Outlaw." Wiedenot would later discover, after some more online sleuthing, that Jackson grew up as anything but an outlaw. According to public records, Jackson was born in Daytona Beach, Florida. Contrary to his tattoo, Jackson was raised in a conservative Christian household. Growing up, he did everything he could to escape his family's culture. As a young man, Jackson attempted to start a rap career under the name Da Truth. However, Da Truth wasn't very good. Jackson spent his early years bouncing around Florida, mainly between Tallahassee and Orlando, all the while claiming to his many girlfriends he was playing football and writing bars. In reality, Jackson was learning how to scam people, specifically successful young women on social media and dating apps. These girls saw Jackson the same way Wiedenot had. Handsome, well-dressed, tall, fit-looking man with charm to impress even the most skeptical women. He used these attributes to lure dozens of women into trusting him. After contacting other victims and hearing their stories, Wiedenot discovered Jackson's operation. She also realized how similar her story was to other victims. On a basic level, all the other victims, including Wiedenot, had a few common experiences. They were contacted by Jackson, usually online, talked with him for a while, then he asked them for a favor or some kind of big purchase with the promise of reimbursement, after which Jackson would either not pay them back or steal their bank information and disappear, seemingly without a trace, until he met Wiedenot, of course. She was the only victim who cared enough to track him down. In fact, no one did more than her in finding so-called Will Jackson, whose birth name was Wilson Edward Jackson. However, he used the name Sincere often, which is why Wiedenot had such a tough time finding him. But when she did, Wiedenot finally saw how extensive Jackson's scamming truly was. Before she continued her research on the other victims, Wiedenot contacted a professional, then 55-year-old LAPD detective Stephanie Kratchier. By 2018, when Wiedenot reached out to her, Detective Kratchier had been investigating Jackson for a while, ever since the charming scam artist had moved to LA back in 2014. Wiedenot could not arrest Jackson herself, but Kratchier could. The Scottsdale sleuth presented Kratchier with all the evidence she collected so far and convinced the LA detective that Jackson needed to be arrested immediately. Kratchier, however, had a lot on her plate. The city of Angels was filled with scamming demons, and small-scale scams like Jackson's were not a #1 priority. Nevertheless, the overworked and overwhelmed detective promised Wiedenot she would arrest Jackson as soon as possible. Wiedenot hung up the phone feeling confident that Kratchier would take care of the arrest. In the meantime, however, Wiedenot could not let the case go. So far, Kratchier only had 8 victims who'd reported Jackson to the authorities. Wiedenot was determined to find more. Wiedenot got to work quickly. She started using the very app Jackson used to contact her to look for other victims in Florida and California. The posts worked, and Wiedenot started talking to several other victims from the 2 states. She even put them in touch with one another, creating a network of Jackson victims who could talk about their experiences. Kratchier found 8 victims during years of investigation. Wiedenot found 10 victims in just 1 month. These women, mostly African American in their 30s, told each other how Jackson humiliated them. Though many of the victims shared their stories with other victims, most were reluctant to give their names to the media out of embarrassment. They all wanted to see some form of justice, though. Kratchier promised Wiedenot an arrest, with the deadline being April 2018. But after traveling to Afghanistan for a few months to work as a civilian air traffic controller, Wiedenot looked at the calendar and noticed the month was January, the year 2019. Wiedenot, in her extensive research, remembered reading how Jackson had gotten away. Most of the escapes were made possible by lazy investigators and prosecutors. Wiedenot couldn't let another detective leave him under a pile of other cases. So she gave Kratchier an ultimatum: arrest Jackson, or Wiedenot would file a complaint on the veteran detective who was set to retire any day now. Kratchier chose the harder option and looked up Jackson on her computer. She found a warrant in his name for grand theft auto and sent a team of officers to bring him in. Jackson was arrested on May 23, 2019 in Los Angeles. He was taken into police custody and hired a lawyer, but the lawyer left after Jackson's check bounced. His public defender convinced him to plead not guilty despite over 60 women coming forward to testify against him on 33 felony charges. In total, Jackson is believed to have collected over $200,000 from his victims, including Wiedenot. Sadly, they'll never get that money back. But they can enjoy knowing that Jackson's face and reputation were smeared across news media outlets like Newsweek, The Daily Beast, and several local LA outlets. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section what you'd rather do: swipe for 2 hours on a dating app, or go out and try to meet a potential match for 8 hours.